Okay, good. So this is Steve Zeltzer with LaborFest and Labor Tech, and I want to welcome you to 2020 LaborFest. And this is when we started Labor Tech, actually, in 1989, we were talking about everyone being able to go online and have international communications. And as a result of the pandemic now, this is how more and more people globally are communicating and how education is taking place, in many cases to the detriment of teachers and students, particularly those poor students who don't have internet access or don't have computers. So there's a digital divide for a large number of poor kids and college students who, for that matter, can't afford internet. And of course, the libraries are closed down, so that makes it even more difficult for people to get internet access. So our topic tonight is on the AB5, this bill passed in California to protect workers who work for companies like Uber and Lyft and other platforms, and also the use of this technology and these platforms to basically enslave workers and to create a situation where workers are basically have no power and are dependent on the owners of these platforms. So we're going to have some presentations, and then we'll open it up to discussion. And thank you for joining. So we'll start from that then. So our first speaker is going to be Steve Hill, and Steve Hill is actually was one of the first people in LaborNet when we started it, and has been working as a writer and written many books about Uber and Lyft and other platforms and how the treatment of workers is completely exploitive. So he's very knowledgeable about this subject, and he also spoke at last year's Labor Tech. And if everyone could mute their sound, that would be good when we have the presentation. So take off, Steve. You're on.
Great, thank you, Steve, and thank you to everybody here. It's a pretty crazy time, obviously, you know, with what's going on, and it's only going to get crazier between now and November. Of course, the presidential election, but also on the ballot is Prop 22, the initiative by Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and others to try and overturn AB5. I haven't seen any polling yet. I'd be interested if anyone else has heard any polling on this, but you know, it's really going to be a big battle because they're going to spend a ton of money. And you know, I was sort of thinking about, you know, how did we get here? And flashing back to like when my book, Raw Deal, How the Uber Economy and Runaway Capitalism are Screwing American Workers, when it came out in 2015, so this is like October 2015, and you know, even the New York Times and many other publications were like saying to me, "Oh, Steve, you're being too extreme. This is going to be great. I mean, this is, you know, the work is going to come to workers. They're just going to get on their smartphones, and the work will come to them. And the Uber and Lyft drivers will have all the work they want. It'll be flexible. They'll have income. I mean, this is just going to be so groovy. This is going to work out. And you're just too extreme. And you know, you're one of these Luddites who just doesn't get it about technology. You know, I mean, I heard this again and again." And I just said, like, I'm sorry, but this is not going to end well. And so here we are now, 2020, and it's not just Uber and Lyft, but you know, Facebook, Google. You know, remember when Google was talking about first, don't be evil, you know, and what is Google now but evil? And so in company after company, we're facing this situation where it's not just that they're providing a service and exploiting people, but they are actually becoming the new infrastructure, the new digital infrastructure for the 21st century. So whether it's, you know, how you shop with Amazon, how you get a ride with Uber and Lyft, how you search, how you find your way around with GPS and maps, all these sorts of things. It's just how we do things now. And yet they're in the hands of these private companies whose sole incentive and desire is to grab our data and turn us into the product that they are marketing to other companies, whether it's advertising and you know, rides or these sorts of things. So you know, they companies like Google and Facebook are basically advertising machines. That's what they are. And they are taking our data and they create these zombie voodoo profiles of each one of us where they can then use that for micro-targeting, and they can sell that ability to micro-target that information to us all just so that we stay on their page and see more ads. That's what it's about. And so then you add to that something like Uber and Lyft and Amazon. Amazon is like the shopping mall where they not only own the mall, but they own a number of the stores in the mall, and they can go to other stores in the mall and say, look, if you don't lower your prices to what we want, we'll take the same product that you're producing and we'll sell it through our other stores, and they basically are a shakedown operation. So, and then you come to Uber and Lyft, and Uber and Lyft, they basically have taken the risk of the taxi business and put it all onto the drivers, is what they've done. And it's not just the labor issues, it's also the environmental issues. It's undermining public transportation. On the environmental issues, I mean, everybody who's lived in a city where Uber and Lyft has risen has experienced the huge amount of congestion that these companies and services have caused. One factoid in San Francisco now, there's about 1,800 regular traditional taxi cabs, and there's about 9,000 or more of Uber or Lyft, so 5 times as many. They basically have flooded the streets with cars, and by doing this, they are swamping and creating a monopoly and trying to drive out business. And one of those businesses they're trying to drive out is public transportation. So you can look and see in city after city where Uber and Lyft have risen and become popular. You see that the public transportation ridership has been down even before the coronavirus pandemic, and so these services are really hurting in many ways, not just labor. So then when you come to labor, we see that because they're flooding the streets with cars, there's not enough work for the workforce that's out there. There's just too many drivers out there. In fact, New York City did a study. It was called Empty Seats in Full Streets. The name kind of tells it all. Basically, these Uber and Lyft drivers, about 40% of the time, they're driving around with no passenger in the car. They're just driving and driving and driving, burning up carbon, adding to congestion, looking for a ride, trying to make a living. And so, they basically have created a system that you couldn't design a worse system from the point of view of the environment, congestion, hurting public transportation, and then hurting the drivers and undermining not only the Uber and Lyft drivers, but existing taxi and livery drivers. So as a result of this, in California, California doesn't often do the right thing. But in this case, with AB5, they have passed a law that is basically made it very likely that the Uber and Lyft drivers would be considered as employees. And recently, the Uber and Lyft have been hit with a triple whammy. First in May, the California Attorney General and then the city attorneys of Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego sued to force AB5 compliance by these companies because they were refusing to do it. They're basically saying, no, our drivers aren't really, we're not a ride company. We're not a transportation company. We're a tech company. And our drivers don't do tech. That's just an ancillary part of our business. It's not the main core. It's just a laughable proposition, and nobody is buying it. And so the CPUC then, after the lawsuit by the Attorney General, the California Public Utility Commission, which is the regulatory body overseeing the ride-sharing industry, has now ruled that they are, in fact, your employees, and you need to start complying with this law. Well, Uber and Lyft, of course, is saying, well, we're going to wait till after this ballot measure, Prop 22, on November 3rd. So as a result, the Attorney General now has gone to court again just a few weeks ago and is seeking a preliminary injunction ordering these companies to turn these drivers into their employees. So, I mean, here's a company that is destroying the environment, filling up our streets, destroying livelihoods of drivers of all different kinds, and now they're completely flouting the law once again and doing everything they can. And also, it should be noted that they're about to spend about $100 million amongst all the different companies in order to overturn AB5, instead of just taking that money, which is a lot of money, and putting it towards the drivers And so, you know, that's just a quick overview of it's a pretty outrageous situation. I'm really hoping that the voters of California see through this. But it remains to be seen what will happen on November 3rd. It should be a huge turnout election because of the presidential election. So hopefully the advocates, the opposition to Proposition 22 are doing their what they need to do to get out there and really try to build understanding around how this law would really undermine labor rights of not only Uber and Lyft drivers, but many other types of drivers. So, Steve, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for your presentation. And if Jack Choi is around, I don't know if he's on yet. Okay, I guess he's not on. Okay, well then we'll go to Edward Escobar, who's with the Alliance Independent Workers and has been organizing around the defense of workers who work for Uber and Lyft. So welcome, Edward.
Thank you. Thank you for having me once again, LaborFest. Always enjoyed collaborating, getting the word out about the corporate abuse and exploitation of workers across the board. And to add to what you said, our focus is beyond just the drivers and gig workers, but essential workers as well. As you know, that essential workers are being compromised in the workplace, and they're not being given the existential protections, but they are being required to return to work. So that means that it goes beyond just gig work, but when you're looking at frontline individuals that their health is being compromised and they're asked to put their lives on the line for a paycheck, and then they're not being given any type of support when it comes to health-wise, when they do contract and then pass it on to their family members as well, which are even further from any type of coverage whatsoever. So thanks for having me. And to add to what Steve Hill had mentioned, because he covered a lot of the topics that we always discuss and did so very well. So thank you for being on top of that, sir. We appreciate that. So we've been in touch with UC Berkeley Mobility Project, and what they're looking at, of course, is just the issues about transportation. And there was an article that came out how Uber is pivoting, and it's always been on their drawing board to be the Uber of everything and everything that's transported. And Dara, the CEO of Uber, has stated that he wanted to be the Amazon of transportation. And that is something that tells you, if you know what Jeff Bezos has done, that tells you exactly what his intentions are. But as Steve Hill had mentioned, regarding big data, Dara had also given away some clues that the big data is their focus, and it's the future of currency, to be quite honest. So as we look at this paradigm shift occurring, as Naomi Klein said in her book Shock Doctrine, when there's these momentous events that occur, and there's a paradigm shift, is when you look to see the ushering in of these transitions that most folks would do a hard pushback against. And that means ushering in the AI, the automation, the self-driving technology, also digital currency. And whereas in the past, people would say, not over my dead body would I accept that. Now it's pretty much, that's what your choice is. Would you prefer to possibly contract the COVID-19 here, or would you accept technology? And most folks will most readily accept the technology. We also work in the gig worker segment. There's been a shift towards delivery, whereas the oversaturation, as Steve Hill had mentioned, has occurred with the rideshare industry. A lot of shift has gone over into any type of deliveries. So you're talking about restaurants and grocery stores and any other items that need to be delivered because of the shelter in place. But there's been circumstances where people have sheltered in place very, very extensively, sheltered in place, and yet still contracted the COVID because of the deliverers transferring, because they have a lot of touch points, as you know, and that will happen to even the most cautious, precautious individuals. You never know where it can come from. So that's why from the beginning, we were contacted by the CDC to conduct a peer review and also to offer up guidelines for drivers. And from the beginning, mind you, we stated masks and gloves were essential. They said, no, it's not at this time a requirement because of concerns for taking the PPE, the personal protective equipment, away from the other needed sources, which would be the frontline healthcare givers, the nurses, the doctors, and so on and so forth. But as you know, there's other means of facial protection, bandanas, scarves, things of that nature that could have been used. The whole idea is to minimize the transference. So we had addressed that up front, but as you know, things changed, and the CDC, they changed their opinion. But these folks are being compromised. Their health is being compromised, and ultimately it falls on who? The taxpayers. And as you know, if you don't know, Dara, the CEO of Uber, had written a letter to Trump asking for coverage of the workers that he himself, under Uber, has claimed that they have no workers. They have no drivers. They say they're not in the transportation industry, but yet he's asking Donald Trump for that stimulus bill. He was asking for coverage protection, and at the same time, he really has the nerve to push it for another ask, and that is to introduce a third classification that's a hybrid between employee and independent contractor. So basically, they came up with this clever name, dependent contractor or dependent worker. Now, to me, a dependent worker sounds like an employee. However, with their abilities to spin the lies into truths, and by repeating lies many times over, which was effectively used by Nazi propaganda, as you'll recall in history. If you don't learn from it, you're due to repeat it. They practice the same approach, repeating lies as if they're truth. And so what we're seeing is the drivers, there's become an awakening by the drivers where they're starting to realize that what's fed to them via the app, because that is how they use the app as a tool in propaganda to reach the drivers, because they're constantly telling them fear and terror, that you will lose your freedom and flexibility. In the meantime, these corporations have the freedom to exploit the flexibility out of these workers for their own benefit. And that is to expand and contract their workforce ad nauseum as needed, with no expense to them, of course, passing that full pain on to the drivers. And they sit around. Now, this is happening even though in New York, they ushered in a minimum wage rule over there. And they also have a cap on the numbers of vehicles, but not the drivers, but the vehicles. What they've been doing over there is locking drivers out, and they have to schedule an opportunity to be able to drive. And so what they'll do in many cases is they'll have a lot of drivers that'll come out, and then maybe they'll do a drive to an airport, and then they'll be waiting there, and then they get locked out. And then they have to return back home, and they don't know when they're going to be given the opportunity to get back on the system, which then creates additional congestion and also a lot of environmental damage, because people are now being falsely bait and switched out onto the street to be ready for work, and then they receive no work. So it's a frustration. It causes PTSD, financial stress, is damaging to the immune system, which then makes folks more susceptible to COVID, because, immune system depressed means you have a greater ability to contract the illness. So, I mean, the drivers are being assaulted from all sides. And why do they do this? Because they feel they can do it and get away with it. Because most drivers are immigrants, low income, minorities, seniors, disabled, students, veterans, and then those that are even further marginalized that had a prior criminal record that cannot get work elsewhere. So this is a typical MO of the demographics of recruitment. And they constantly, people, they ask, well, if you don't like it, why don't you just leave? And if everyone did that, then they wouldn't have any workers. But the reality is they constantly recruit. And there's newbies, they call them newbie part-timers, that come in, and there's a high churn rate, it's high turnover. There's only a small number of folks that are able to withstand it because they can't get any other type of work. So it's not easy for them to transition. And it's really, it's egregious when people are that uncaring and unfeeling towards individuals that don't have many options, and then basically have the attitude, you know, if you don't like it, then just leave it. Well, it's not that simple. And we should be concerned about many of the folks that are being exploited, because when it happens to them and we do not pay attention, it can come looking for us, and our time will come. And as you can see right now, this COVID is the opening act to permanent displacement of the workforce by AI, automation, self-driving, and so on and so forth. So this is something that people need to wake up to and start to address this. And that's why a lot of our focus is on shaping the future of work. And we have to have the narrative out there, and we have to start the discussion now. And that's why I really appreciate Steve Seltzer, all the work with LaborFest, because they're doing that effectively, and they're bringing together great minds to have this discussion. Because if we don't do something about it now, then it may be a little too late later on. And we need to address this with legislators. Our group were the ones that started the discussion about AB5 with Lorena Gonzalez, with Senator Jerry Hill, and Lorena Gonzalez as a state assemblywoman, Lorena Gonzalez, AD Assembly District 80 in Southern California. And so we had meetings with their office way prior, when everyone else was complaining about low pay, poor treatment. We said, no, you need to address the core issues, and that is misclassification of employment, calling workers independent contractors, but treating them worse than part-time minimum wage employees. And as a matter of fact, part-time minimum wage employees have more rights than we do. They have access to regulatory agencies, as well as they have access to lawyers who know how to procedurally file any legal action to stop abuse of that nature. So we need to address these things. A lot of the other groups that are out there, they seem to think that by unionizing, that is going to be the savior. And we've always been the ones saying that, you know what, we're pro-worker first before anything else. And unionizing, yeah, it's a tool, but it's not the solution. And so it could be a part of that, but as we've known, a lot of unions have not been very effective, nor have they been very efficient in working to get things done for the worker, because they become this corporatized, disorganized labor that at times is having meetings secretly behind closed doors with this corporate ilk that is committing the exploitation. So you'll see a lot of other groups that are out there, they're talking and walking like employees, like they want to be employees. And that is for the purpose because they want to have representation. They want to unionize. But unionizing first, like I tell all the folks I speak with, you must unify first before you can unionize. So it's a first step in any process, but it's through grassroots, the new alternative labor movement, which is what we represent, we're able to be effective. And we're able to usher in change, like with AB5 that was passed as of January of this year. And of course, is Uber and Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, all these folks that are app-based, they feel that they are above the law. And we're here to remind them that they are not. So we're counting on everyone's support to get the word out to people to vote no on Proposition 22. And it's essential that we all support that because they feel that they could buy the legislators. They feel they could buy their way and rise above and realize AB5 was formulated specifically to address Uber and Lyft because of their extreme violation, exploitation of the workforce. So they want a special carve out. And Lorena Gonzalez, Assemblywoman, has said, no, this is not going to happen. And it seems like we've got the support of Gavin Newsom, even though he's been very tech friendly in the past, of anyone who's known his record. Kamala Harris, she's her brother-in-law is Tony West, who, you know, he's the chief legal officer of Uber. I mean, my goodness, there's so much going on behind the scenes of glad handing and people, you know, a lot of connections. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap on that. And then anything else we could go ahead and jump to if anyone has any questions. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Steve.
Thanks, Edward. And I don't know if Jack Choi has joined us yet. Maybe there's a time confusion. Anyway, he's in Hong Kong, so maybe he's still not on. So hopefully he'll get on a little later. So why don't we then open it up for questions, comments. I mean, one issue is this pandemic and what it's going to do to workers in this country, because a lot of workers, of course, are not going to be going back to work. And especially in urban areas, a lot of workers who work from offices are going to be working online. And, and I think a lot more workers will become temporary as this economy hopefully improves over a certain period of time. So why don't we open up to comments, discussions, and people can unmute. Anybody would like to?
Steve, I see that there's one question there from Eric about how Uber and Lyft fare through the COVID, and it's sort of been interesting to watch that aspect of it. So their ride-sharing business is getting wiped out. Their ridership is down. You know, I've seen figures anywhere from 85 to 90%. The food delivery business is up 50%, as everybody can imagine. People are ordering out, and so you know, it's Uber just actually bought Postmates for a $2.65 billion in stock swap. So when you look at that deal, you see that the vulnerability of both these companies, because there, you know, usually when there is a buyout like that, there's some cash being exchanged. But basically, I can imagine that Postmates is probably really hurting. They offered to be bought out. Uber said, yeah, we're not giving you any cash. We'll just give you stock. But if you look at Uber's stock, it hasn't exactly been doing so well. So how desperate must have Postmates have been to take Uber stock that has crashed, you know, about anywhere from 30% to sometimes up to 50% over the last year or so since it went public. So, and it's, you know, I mean, look, Uber can do all it wants to, and Lyft too, to try and beef up their food delivery business. But bottom line, there's only so much money to be made from delivering an $8 burrito. And that's, I mean, there's just no money in that kind of business. The margins are so low that if this is the business that they're going to be trying to, you know, be this big corporate behemoth over, I just don't see it's gonna succeed. And in the meantime, who's going to get into, how many people are going to get into an Uber and Lyft car right now because of the COVID situation, especially during the current surge? So we're talking about companies that are extremely vulnerable right now. And, you know, we'll see what happens on November 3rd, but that could be, I mean, I could envision Uber maybe pulling out of California. Imagine that if they don't succeed on November 3rd, and suddenly UC Berkeley Labor Center has estimated that, I think the figure was about $450 million that Uber and Lyft haven't paid in providing the types of supports that they will have to provide to their drivers once AB5 goes into effect. So they're on the hook for a huge amount of expenditures, and New York and New Jersey are now looking at passing similar laws. So that's, you know, Uber. I would not be in Dara Khosrowshahi's seat right now.
You're not investing in Uber.
No, I'm shorting Uber.
Okay, Mehmet has a question, and then Erica and Kenji.
First of all, thank you both to Stephen and Edward for a great presentation. But the last point that Stephen touched, I have a question on this, is that their finances. Look, they don't have any workers. They don't own a single car, yet the money keeps pouring in from the people. So what are their expenses that puts them in the red or jeopardizes them as long as the drivers are not workers? What are they using this money for? Well, I mean, they should have a huge amount of cash stashed away, because I don't see, except for the tech, the expenditures, what are they doing with this money? They don't own, buildings. They don't own cars. So where's that money going to?
Well, they subsidize rides. That's what it's been until their business collapsed because of the COVID pandemic. But they subsidize rides. So when you get in that Uber or Lyft car, you're only paying about, the estimates are about half the cost of that ride. The other half are being paid by Uber and Lyft. So, they have a business model where literally the more people use it, the more into debt they go. How do you make money on something like that? That's just insane from a business perspective. And so, yeah, they still do have, Uber still claims to have about, I've seen numbers anywhere from 7 to 9 billion in cash on hand to ride out this storm and to buy up companies, like Uber, like Postmates, but that was just a stock swap. But they basically have been subsidizing rides since day one as a way of undermining the competition and getting market share. In other businesses, that's called predatory pricing. You're not even allowed to do that kind of thing. And yet they've been getting away with this. So
and this the competition being the taxi companies?
Taxi companies and public transportation.
Public transportation.
Yeah. Look, the Edward Escobar here, the end game for Uber and Lyft has always been about ushering in self-driving vehicles as soon as possible. They did not anticipate the legislators catching up to them so quickly. They thought that they could just bowl them over, as they're attempting to do with this 110 million plus that they've dropped in with the Proposition 22. They even made a deal in New York with the Machinists Union in the creation of the IDG, the Independent Drivers Guild, and they offered them $600,000 in 2016, and that was under an agreement that they would not strike or protest till 2022. That being a date that they had in mind, that they would already be able to have the self-driving fully rolled out. And as you know, they were doing that initially in San Francisco until the Attorney General had to put a stop to it, and then they went over to Arizona, which over there they're much more receptive, and then they also didn't comply with the certain agreements that they make, because they promise the world and they don't even deliver a deserted island in the middle of nowhere. That's how they do it. Bait and switch, and that's how they've always been able to get away with it, because they're constantly changing whatever the agreements, which is the same thing that they do to the drivers. They usher in the constant change in the agreement via the app while the driver's driving, and the driver's not able to pull over and look at it. You can't, even if you try to screenshot it and expand it, it's really hard to read. It's not legible. You cannot continue driving unless you accept the terms and conditions. So you could imagine what they're doing. It's a unilateral decision that's being made, yet they claim they have no workers, they have no drivers. They just cut loose close to 7,000 actual workers from their HQs. But that's how they do it. And they claim that they don't have this type of a workforce, but yet they don't allow the drivers to set their own rates, terms, and conditions. And that is essential. If you're a real independent contractor, like a plumber, electrician, a carpenter, is they set their own rates, terms, and conditions. The amount of control mechanisms that are in place, the amount of threats and intimidation and fear and terror that they use on the workers is just unimaginable. And yet they still claim by repeating lies and misrepresenting the facts that they are a software company and not in transportation. So it is utterly ridiculous, and now things are coming to a head, hopefully. I did want to touch on another subject regarding the deliveries. Mayor London Breed in San Francisco had put a limit on the delivery charges because the delivery charges for the restaurants were like 30-40%. Well, the profit margin for the restaurants to begin with is approximately about 30%. So Uber and Lyft, I mean, not Lyft, but Uber and DoorDash and Postmates, those companies were squeezing the restaurants. Now, they've continued to do it in other places around the country, and I'm sure in different parts of the world they're doing something similar. But London Breed had put a limit, at least during the pandemic, to 15%. But still, the whole thing with these companies is like transportation, and like Dara has stated, they want to be the portal. They want to be the doorway to everything transported, and that includes food. So what they're doing, as Travis Kalanick, the former CEO of Uber, had been forced out, he also took quite a bit of money, billions of dollars, with him. And so he dropped that into a concept called cloud kitchens. And the cloud kitchens are these kitchens that are basically recreating the same recipes from these different restaurants. They're providing delivery service, but then they are also hijacking the clientele. And as we discussed earlier, it's about big data, and about data, it's also about clientele. And in a business opportunity of a restaurant, when they sell a restaurant business opportunity, you're selling your clientele. That's the goodwill. Well, the delivery services are getting it for free, and they're charging the restaurant to give them their clientele. And they're also creating these fake URLs, these websites that have similar names to the restaurants, and that it's being rediverted back then. Grubhub was sued because of that, because they were stealing the clientele with these other websites that they were using. So they call it cloud kitchen, they call it dark kitchen, they call it ghost kitchen. They're the same concept, and they're basically outsourcing to, even like we had one of our team members who had stated that she went to pick up an order that was being prepared by a guy wearing shorts in his own kitchen at an apartment. So that means health code violation ad nauseum. You can only imagine. But they are not regulated the same way. They're operating not in brick and mortar locations that you would think like in a retail, like where restaurants would be. No, they're operating in these containers, like cargo containers, that are in low rent district areas, industrial areas. And they're doing this and getting away with it. And so Lorena Gonzalez is also looking at that. We're trying to support also in there, but the restaurants, which are small, medium-sized businesses, are being driven out. And as you know, San Francisco has one of the highest numbers of restaurants per capita as compared to any other city around the world. And that is being squeezed out. The middle class is being squeezed out of existence. And as you know, the Trump administration, who appointed the director for the National Labor Relations Board, has switched things, and they were looking at investigating the matter of Uber and Lyft and the violations of the app-based companies across the country. But then when Trump appointed this new director of the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, things ground to a halt. So that's where things are at. And hopefully, with everyone being more aware, there becomes an awakening during this pandemic, and we're able to rise up in unity and solidarity to affect positive change on a grand scale.
Thank you, Edward. And Erica, you had a question? Erica's question, if she's, I guess she's muted. Are there no on 22 buttons, etc.?
There we go. I've got it.
Okay.
I wanted to, now I have 30 questions, but now I'm going to skip my first question. But what can the consumer, or for solidarity, what can the users do, even if you were to plan ahead to be able to show, to work towards some kind of consumer fight back or solidarity with the workers, not only Proposition 22, that's the obvious thing to do, but like, for instance, if you don't use those DoorDash or whatever they are, then somebody's not making money, some poor person also. You want to say, I'm not going to use all of that, but then what's going to happen with all those workers that need the couple of bucks that are there so badly?
Well, this is Edward Escobar. You're looking at actually a displacement. See, what happens with these brick and mortar locations, they have their overhead and their fixed costs. And as you know, in San Francisco, the rent has been just exorbitant and been continuing to blow out of proportions as to what they're generating. So they have to keep raising their costs and charges to customers. But you can imagine, look, they have their wait staff, but they also have their brick and mortar locations that they have to cover. What's happening when you do use delivery services?
The sound has gone down, Edward.
The sound was weird.
How about now? Is it better?
No, it's still low.
We can understand you though.
Okay.
Okay. So the point is this: is that when you use a delivery service, then you're no longer the brick and mortar location. When you go and visit a brick and mortar location, you're ordering appetizers, you're ordering beverages, you're ordering desserts, you're tipping the wait staff. Maybe you're ordering a drink from a bartender. Bartender, so on and so forth. So all these additional types of services are no longer being used. And those are areas of centers of profit that enables the brick.
Can I suggest that you turn your sound off and on and see if it'll get better? I can bear it's
Or
not
call
coming
back
through.
in. Call back in would be the other thing.
How about now?
No.
No.
Oh.
Maybe you should call back in, Edward.
Okay, will do.
Okay, so another question or comment is Jim, and Jim is with the United Transport or SMART, and wants to talk about Zoom in San Francisco and the automated rideshare companies. Jim?
Yeah, hi. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm familiar with this.
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but there's several companies. The main one is pronounced Zoom, just like, what we're talking on, but it's spelled Z-U-M. And this is a rideshare or TNC that there's probably 4 or 5 that are authorized to transport children in California. And this is one of them. And they're moving into basically the school bus industry, school transportation, which across the nation is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And so they're now, and they use the same model. They violate AB5. They work the same as Uber and Lyft, essentially, except they can pick up kids. They have a little higher level of background checks, but not really that much. And so they're operating in San Francisco. We brought to the school board's attention that, they're contracting with these people that are violating the law and have been violating the law and continue to. And I think the school district just authorized, I think, up to another $1 million next year. And now what's happened in Oakland, Zoom has been awarded the entire transportation contract in Oakland just recently. And, they can't run, as far as my understanding is these ride shares, they can't maintain their own vehicles. So they're sort of acting as a middleman. And so they'll use their ride share drivers, and these are drivers in cars mostly, and then they'll subcontract out with other companies that put kids in vans. They're not using school buses. The entire contract, and this is for special ed, does not have the word school bus in it one time. So that tells you where they're going. It's a very short 20-page contract. And so Zoom is sort of moving into being a transportation provider. So they can run their gig, exploit workers with the gig thing and then move around to the lowest bidder, I guess, and undermine unions and wages and everything else. And so that's another twist to this, and that's what's happening at the moment.
Are they having all their background checks that the school district?
There's nowhere near the level of qualifications, training, scrutiny that a school bus driver has. It's like the highest in the industry. We're under constant monitoring from DMV, CHP, sometimes the FBI. We get pull notices on every little thing that happens with our license. Continuing training, almost zero tolerance for anything, including any kind of moral turpitude. And we have limits on, we can't drive for more than 10 hours. We have to be commercial licensed. If you've ever seen a Zoom vehicle driving around, I've had pictures. They'll usually have Uber, Lyft, sometimes Postmates, sometimes a billboard on the top. They're doing everything. So that's kind of the operation. I just wanted to make everyone aware of this new sort of trend that's happening. And it's spreading across the country. And Zoom, there's two other companies. One's Hop, Skip, Drive, and another, I can't remember the name of the other one. But Zoom, just if you look them up, they've got, I think it's Wells Fargo. They got a lot of venture capital money from your usual players. I think it's up to $70 million. So that's what they're doing. They portray themselves as, a company that's trying to help mothers get their kids to school, and they provide nanny service and, whatever. But that's their MO. And
are they working through the school district or through the individual parent?
They have a contract with the school
they
district.
have a contract. The school, San Francisco just put out the bid. They're going to put it out again next year, and they awarded a small amount to Zoom, I think 10 to 20 routes. If you look at and they tried to play it off like they would be driving vans or something, but if you look at the list of the drivers they provided in the bids, they're all Class C regular car drivers. There's 2 commercial drivers. They're using cars more than likely. And so they have this contract, and I just looked at I think the budget for SFUSD seems to have given up to $1 million to Zoom. I'm not sure why, but the school district is putting out the bid again this next year because they messed it up. And the other thing I wanted to mention about this Oakland contract is it has, there's a clause in there for a rider. So they're basically opening it up to other districts to use this contract as a model. So, welcome all aboard. Anyone who wants to do this and save some money. I think it was 11.5 million from Oakland USD to Zoom per year.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that.
Kenji had his hand up. Is Kenji still had a question? Kenji?
Can't hear.
Yeah, I do, but I'd like to hear what Stephen has to say first on that.
Well, keep in mind they're doing this in the context of there was just an article in the Chronicle yesterday that about half of Muni bus routes are not going to be revived,
right.
And so it's just another giant step towards privatizing what has been a public sector service, and that's the theme running through all these, going back to 2014, 2015, is that in occupation after industry, the public sector is failing. It's failing, one, to regulate these companies properly. It's failing to make sure there are proper inspections and background checks. It's failing to make sure they follow the same laws as taxis. I mean, even right here in San Francisco, which is supposed to be a progressive city, and Jerry Brown was the governor that oversaw the first TNC ride-sharing law in the country, and basically took away the ability of local governments to regulate these companies in their local jurisdiction. And so, here you have a situation where the companies are flooding the streets with cars, taking over monopoly share, and San Francisco can't say, well, we want to limit the number of Uber and Lyfts. But on the other hand, San Francisco can limit the number of taxis, traditional taxis. That's what the medallion system is about. So it's a schizophrenic system in which the same rules are not being applied, and the public sector is just really failing to put the right rules in place to make this product safe, to make it work for everybody. With so much congestion going on, I mean, keep in mind, probably, the figures I've seen in cities, maybe 25% of people in a city like San Francisco use Uber and Lyft. But with the congestion that Uber and Lyft are contributing to, one study found that they contributed to 40% of the increasing congestion since, in recent years. Everyone else who's in a car or in a bus or any other type of vehicle has to be in the same congested traffic as those Uber and Lyft passengers who are using that service. So basically 25% of people are using a service that is impacting the other 75% in a very dramatic way. And so it's just the public sector needs to get a handle on becoming a powerful entity again, to put the right rules and regulations around this new digital infrastructure that we are all starting to use increasingly in increasing amounts.
This Edward Escobar, all goes back to the privatization of public transportation. But you have these public entities that are being set up to fail. And as you see, like the Postal Service, when you see Trump coming out and supporting, UPS and FedEx and these other corporatized transport services, and then setting up the Postal Service to fail. So it's this ongoing process, and it's the privatization of basically the public trust, if you will, and that's where we're at. So we need to address this. But yes, myself having been a driver for almost 6 years now, and I had started with Uber, and interestingly enough, their safety checks, inspections, when we first started, they actually put the vehicle up and remove the wheel and check the brakes. Now it's just a visual walk around, and they just do visual inspection and check safety belts and if windows roll up and down, turn signals, lights, and that's about it. So that's how things have declined, because they've been able to do this and get away with it. So the safety vetting is not there. So these Zoom drivers, it's the same thing. It's not on par with what the expectations that have been made for transport of the public. And as you see, like bus drivers, they're like the existing bus, they're like 70 times safer, and that was listed in the article, than what a standard public transport that you would see a private vehicle.
Yeah, the same applies to us. Yeah.
So this is an ongoing problem that happens time and time again that we need to address, because it's being unleashed on society on a global level.
Okay, well, it looks like Jack has been able to join our conversation about these platforms, and also the technology and cooperatives. And one of the things that we have discussed in past discussions on this is the issue of workers actually running the platforms for the benefit of workers instead of the billionaires who are exploiting the workers. So welcome to this discussion at LaborFest and Labor Tech, Jack. And would you like to speak on the issues that you've been studying?
Sorry, I cannot hear very clearly. I think
You're on. Good.
I'm hearing some radio or TV.
Okay, can everybody mute themselves?
Steve, I think you can mute everybody, and it's Beekman that isn't muted.
I'll unmute Jack here. Okay, good. Okay, so Jack, you're on.
Yes, I'm on, but I'm hearing a TV program or a documentary about the history of inequality in America, I think. Is that what everyone else is hearing?
No.
No, we don't hear that.
Really?
It must be the CIA.
Okay, maybe it's just me.
Okay.
That may be the other screen if you
Okay.
have.
Yes. Okay, my fault. I was having another documentary on in my computer. Sorry, that was my fault. Okay, now I have cleared the noise. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, everyone can hear you.
All right, and I lost my screen now. Okay, this is my side. All right, so hello everyone from Hong Kong.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Jack Cho. I'm sitting in my office in the Chinese University of Hong Kong, with which I have ended my employment relationship last month. Okay, I will move away, and so I'm in the middle of packing my stuff. But on my on either side of my background image, okay, on the one hand, you will see PCCHK, Platform Co-op Consortia, okay, Hong Kong. So this is a movement we have started in Hong Kong 3 years ago, okay, to help foster a cooperative, economy in the digital sector, so that the technologies are not owned by Google or mainland Chinese, okay, tech giants, but by the average people, by the workers themselves. So this is a local initiative, but of course it's part of. I'm sure in San Francisco, in the U.S. we have this PCC, okay, global consortia. So we have. I'm one of the co-founders for the movement in Hong Kong, and on the other hand, you will see my 2016 book called "Goodbye, I Slave." Okay, and it's about my work, learning from workers, assembly line workers, but also digital media, consumption, okay, prosumers in mainland China, okay, including Foxconn workers who make iPhone and iPad and all the devices. So that's why it's called slavery. So that's slavery came from campaign, okay, anti-Foxconn, exploitation from the assembly line to the data mine. And I put it up, as even though the book is 4 years old, I still think you guys should buy it, because if you buy it, all the proceeds I got from selling the book will go to the Democratic Republic of the Congo to support a workers' radio. Okay, and these are workers who extract minerals, okay, coltan, for example, for our digital devices. So this is the organization is called Observatory for Peace, okay, but it's actually a workers, a miner, okay, workers radio station. So I would encourage everyone to read the book and also support Congolese, okay, labor movement and peace movement. And I think I have already spent enough time introducing myself and selling my book.
Is the book in English?
Yes, it's published by the University of Illinois Press, 2016. And if you buy it, I think it will cost you like $20. And then $1 will $1 will go to Congo. That's how much I earn.
So, Jack, why don't you talk about what you've been working on as far as cooperative platforms and the idea of workers running these platforms and the digital revolution benefiting the working class instead of the capitalist class, which is presently the situation. I mean, the titans, the tech titans, the robber barons, the people who are stealing information, data from people without even letting them know, and compensation. How do you think that a cooperative format would take place when they control the state? In other words, the Chinese government, for example, is not interested in cooperatives, worker cooperatives running Chinese companies. I mean, they're as are Uber and Google and these other companies. They don't want the workers to run these. They have control. That's how they make their profits, by exploiting these workers.
Yeah, cooperative. When I grew up in China, okay, we heard about cooperatives, but we don't know what they are. Okay, and they wear the socialist hat, but in the actual operation is just like another company, or even less democratic, than the quote unquote normal Western style company. And we think they are dinosaurs from the Stalin era. But when I moved to Hong Kong, okay, that was 23 years ago. right? And Hong Kong was starting its so-called one country, two systems, okay, but now it's becoming one country, one system. And but the one country, two system used to be, you know, and on my university campus, we have multiple co-ops, okay, by women like workers who used to be garment workers in Hong Kong, but when the factory moved to mainland China, so they were laid off. Okay, and so they started to have their own mutual help. So I started to work with them, and also we just were successful. We had a campaign to let our women's co-op, you know, they make snacks, okay, for students, and when there are protests, they make free drinks, okay, for the protesters. And so the co-op movement have been around at least for 200 years. Okay, the Scots saying they have longer than 200 years, and the British, you know, Rochdale say we are almost 200 years. But basically, it's a reaction to the undemocratic exploitation, the humanization, the dehumanization of labor. Okay, that's how the modern co-op movement started. So in China, you know, Beijing still claims to have the world's largest co-op. Okay, it's the All China Rural Cooperative, but the International Cooperative Alliance, okay, the global umbrella organization for the you know, planetary co-op movement, actually they don't recognize, okay, China's, okay, the Communist Party co-op as a true co-op, because as we know from the Rochdale principles that are enshrined in the ICA, International Cooperative Alliance, okay, and the number one principle is that people have to have freedom to join or to exit the co-op. But in China, you cannot exit, okay, unless you die, right? And there's on the one hand state captured, or sometimes we call it state co-opted co-op. Okay, so it's like yellow unions, right? You cannot say because there's yellow unions, so all the unions are hopeless. Okay, they are, you know, a moral arm, or sometimes even a militant arm of the bosses. Okay, you cannot say that. Okay, there are co-ops and other co-ops. So what this movement we are starting actually thanks to Trevor Schultz. Okay, some of you probably know him or heard of him. You know, he is a professor from the New School in New York, and so he came to Hong Kong in 2016, and then we started the Hong Kong chapter, basically, okay, for the platform co-op because of his direct influence, okay, and translating initially by his work, you know, for the Rosa Luxemburg, you know, Foundation, we started by translating that into Chinese, and then we started to visit. So once we have, so his first work, you know, from 2016, you know, about platform co-op, introducing, you know, different success cases, mostly in the US and in Europe. But once we started to have that theoretical lens to look for, okay, co-ops, okay, that are the most important thing about co-op is one member, one vote, okay, and you know, no matter, you know, it's not who have more money, okay, or who have more say, but it's actually, you know, everyone is equal. So if it is democratically governed like this, then it's a co-op. So we started, after we translated Trevor Schultz is a short piece of about 30 pages into Chinese. We started to interview. We started to find out there are, you know, right next to my university, the next subway station is called Tai Po. In Tai Po, there's a grassroots Uber, basically. Okay, it's a Uber service, but owned by neighbors, the neighborhoods. So people giving free rides to each other. And because of Hong Kong law, you cannot, you know, pay for a driver who did not have a special commercial license, okay, from the government. Actually, Hong Kong government arrested Uber drivers and also Uber managers, okay, back in 2016, because they did not have, okay, the special commercial operation license. So I think it's still too early, going back to one of the things Steve was saying, you know, it's still too early to say all the states are captured. Okay, Beijing was, in 2016, Beijing was the first nation state in the world to embrace Uber. But in the same year, Hong Kong, okay, the municipal government of Hong Kong actually were arresting Uber drivers and managers and sue them for violating the commercial, license, okay, regulation. But then in Taipo, 10 minutes from where I am now, people started to co-op, but then the way they transact is that the driver do not receive any money, okay, for her or himself, but the person who took the client would go to a 7-Eleven, okay, to donate the money to a Red Cross, okay, to one of the NGOs, okay, and then give the receipt to the driver. Okay, so that's actually a moral economy. So this is what I'm saying. So even though this organization is called Taipo Leimang. Leimang is the Cantonese name for like people sharing a taxi. Okay, poor people sharing a taxi. But then it's not. It's registered as a normal company, as a private company, because Hong Kong we still have very backward colonial era law that the government does not trust co-op. Okay, so it's legally not a cooperative, but in actual operation, it's working like a cooperative. One member, one vote, and then it's trying to create, okay, non-monetary social value, okay, including donation. So that's the kind of thing. So we have been collecting success stories of co-op, practice using digital media, using the smartphone. Okay, so that platform is called B. They created their own app. It's called By the Way. Okay, BTW. Okay, and then once you download that, you can use that to order your taxi. Okay, in the neighborhood, and then there are similar stories in Taiwan, in mainland China. So we have been visiting them. So we put together in 2018, 2 years ago, we put out the first Chinese language book about platform co-op. Okay, and it's called, let me see if I have it in my office. My office is now getting empty. Oh yeah, I have a copy there. So in 2016, I think 2016, I was in San Francisco with the LaborFest.
That's right.
Yeah, so in the same year, we translated Trevor Shaw's English work into Chinese. And in 2017, we started to translate more and also collect more stories. And in 2018, 2 years ago, we published, so this is the first Chinese language book. And it has 4 parts. And so the license is Creative Commons. Okay. And then the first part is about Uber, how evil Uber is, but also how, in Hong Kong and in other Chinese societies, people are having a worker-controlled Uber. Okay, so for urban transport. The second part is about recycle. Okay, how local environmental groups are also developing their platforms. And the third part is about artists. Okay, each part of this start with a local or Taiwanese, okay, Chinese, example, and then it goes to the American or European, stories. So this is how we want to empower the local movement, not just to learn from, US or the UK, but to learn from, the local success stories first. And finally, we have one part about human resource management. So it's like Amazon Mechanic Turk, but we started with a organization called Translate for Her. So these are for ethnic minority women in Hong Kong, mostly Muslim women in Hong Kong, who don't understand English or even Chinese very well. They're from Pakistan, okay, or Indonesia, okay. But then how can they deal with everyday life? And so this is they basically they use WhatsApp, okay, and then the women can use WhatsApp to take a photograph of a government notice, okay, or of a letter from a local school in either English or Chinese. And then the volunteer would provide free translation for her. So it's called Translate for Her. So this one is both for against the racism and also, male domination, okay, especially for the ethnic minority group. And it was started by one of our PhD students, in the sociology department. And then after that, we talk about Upwork and Smart, Smart is the largest artist co-op, but now it also includes delivery, the Deliveroo workers in Brussels, okay, in Belgium. It has, I think it has 70,000 active members, right? And finally, we talk about Up and Go. You guys probably heard about Up and Go in New York, right? So these are for cleaning, for household services platform, but they are owned and managed, okay, by the cleaners themselves, to also promote dignity. Okay, oftentimes workers talk about digital media as dehumanizing. The algorithms are alienating and exploitative, but if workers are the owners and the decision makers for those algorithms, in the case of Up and Go, I think they also got funding from New York City. Okay, the city council also funds part of it. So I think again, going back to Steve's question, the state apparatus, okay, is a very important constraining factor, to co-op movement and to digital labor struggles. But it's still too early. There's, the state apparatus is still a site of struggle. So we should, like in the spirit of the battle, the new battle of Seattle, okay, to occupy not just the street, but state resources, okay, including their investments, okay. Like I will be moving to Singapore next week. Like the Singapore government now is realizing, okay, platform co-op is a way to deal with this youth unemployment. Okay, young people are looking for jobs, but then there's no jobs, and young people, usually are very familiar, okay, or are very ambitious to develop digital business. So the government, so state resources are now, big time. Okay, it's going into public health, okay, because of COVID-19, but also into alternative ways of digital, okay, development. So I think we should not give up the fight to develop platform co-ops using, okay, government and public resources while mobilizing among ourselves.
Okay, well, thank you, Jack, for that contribution on development of cooperative control of digital platforms. And as we were discussing earlier, with the COVID crisis in schools right now in education, a lot of students who are not in schools, poor students, Black students, they don't even have access to the internet in the United States because it's privately owned. So they can't even get on a computer, and many of them don't have computers. So basically the shutdown of the schools, again, is a catastrophe for poor working class students, Black, Latino students who don't have any money and don't have resources to digital access, to broadband and other access. So that's another issue. Okay, we have a question, Erica.
I think this is a great idea and wonderful, and I'm going to get, I'm going to look up some more information about what you've shared, Jack. But like that would be the great way to undercut Uber and all of these gig economy things, is to cooperatize it, to have it be worker owned. But wow, what a job. It would have to get funded. It's so big. It's so huge. I mean, what do you, Jack, what do you think about, you know, like the fact that it's kind of taken over? It's even worldwide. Does the co-op movement in this have a chance to, in any big way, to take over?
Well, like one of my favorite cultural studies gurus, okay, Stuart Hall said, you know, the real politics are politics without guarantee. Okay, if I say, you know, for sure, you know, platform co-ops will take over and defeat Uber, we can just sit and wait, then I'm pretending. Okay, I don't want to pretend. And you know, I think again, you know, we need to start from the local. Okay, I think one of the lessons we learned from the socialist and the labor movement of the last century is that, you know, our ancestors, you know, from Karl Marx down to Chairman Mao, okay, they think in very grand terms, spatially and historically, right? But then when it comes to development like co-op, okay, co-op are probably too small for big thinkers. And I think the 21st century, I think there's one word we can learn from the Silicon Valley, okay, you know, software industry. Okay, not all of them are completely evil. Okay, the big ones are evil for sure, but then there are smaller and interesting, and actually lots of them inherit. Like one of my favorite examples is ThoughtWorks. I don't know whether you guys heard of ThoughtWorks. You know, started by a Jamaican, you know, software engineer, and then they have been, you know, like when Aaron Schwartz, I don't know how many of you know about him. You know, he was, you know, trying to open up, okay, the private property regime of the internet, so that knowledge can be shared in a way we can call it cyber communism kind of way. Okay, he was on the payroll of ThoughtWorks before he committed suicide. Okay, under the shameful, okay, persecution of the Obama regime. Okay, and but then the kind of spirit, I would say, you know, we need to carry that spirit, but in a local sense. This is what I want to say. You know, what platform co-ops, again, I'm using Trevor Schultz, you know, metaphor. He would like to say every platform co-op is a snowflake. Okay, so when you look at far, when it's snowing, it looks like all the snowflakes are the same. But if you really, you know, use a microscope to look at an individual piece of snowflake, each one of them is different. Okay, and a good co-op could be just 3 people. So once you have a team, a division of labor, okay, and so like the female workers co-op on our campus making snacks, they have never been more than 5 members, but they have been there for, you know, more than a quarter century. Okay, and then of course digital media initially, I would say, would allow small teams to experiment and to learn more about themselves. Many teams expand too quickly; they don't even know about themselves. And Uber, for example, is a disaster even from a capitalist point of view, because Uber has burned so much money; it's not making any cent of a profit. Okay, you know, but then you know, if you talk about capitalism, it's about capital accumulation, right? This is the capital. They're not accumulating capital; they're burning out money. Right? Why? It's because this kind of unicorn, okay, platform capitalism grow too quickly. They don't know each other. They don't know about their own team, their own people. They don't respect. You probably still remember what is his name? Nick. I only remember his nick, the founder of Uber. He was sexually
Travis Kalanick.
Yes,
Travis Kalanick.
Yes, Travis. Yeah, Kalanick. Yeah, Kalanick. Yes, he was sexually harassing his own employees, so I think if there are small snowflakes, I hope Erica is right. Okay, that the tech barons will be replaced by co-ops. I hope, but realistically, I would say we need many more experiments at the local level. Okay, because one member, one vote is easy to say. Any one of you who have been part of a traditional co-op knows how hard it is once you have 10 people, once you have 100 people. The largest one I'm involved in Hong Kong, we have like almost 300 people. So how can you exercise 100, one member, one vote? I think there needs to be, we're still at the initial stage of a learning curve, okay, to, on the one hand, use digital media for co-ops, but at the same time, co-ops can use the potentials offered by digital media to grow very quickly, to scale. Okay, this is the last class I am teaching, but I should say I'm still learning. It's a 2-month summer course, again started by the new school, Trevor Schultz, but also Jose Marie, who is the in charge of Mondragon University. For those of you who know the co-op movement, Mondragon is the largest co-op, the 7th largest employer of any type in Spain. And so Mondragon being an old co-op, a traditional industrial co-op, okay, but it also has its retail and other services. Okay, now they're partnering up with the platform co-op. So we are now in the 2nd month. The goal is to incubate and a small project. So what we are telling our students now is to don't think about too early on to think about how can I replace Uber globally, but you think about your MVP. So this is the keyword of our discussion last week. MVP is not in a sports term here. Okay, it's not the NBA's MVP, but platform co-op term means the minimum viable product. Minimum viable product. So it's small size, small team, something small scale that does not need too much investment. Okay, most of the startups today have to be very lean because we don't want to, even if Wall Street want to give me $1 million, I don't want them. Okay, I don't know what they will want. I don't want to sell out on the first day, right? So if you have small, okay, minimum viable product, the product is viable in your neighborhood, in your locality, okay, and we don't want to predict the exact shape of the snowflake. As long as the snowflake can sustain its own form and then even grow a little bit, even it's very slowly, gradually, that's good enough. Okay, you focus on a minimum viable product at the beginning, and then the next step, okay, at the regional or national, even global level, is to say okay, now we have all these existing snowflakes, okay, and then how can we let them help each other to form an ecological relationship, okay, rather than to have a big one, okay. That's the same thing we learned from 20th century socialism. Once you have a big one with one communist party or labor party controlling it, it can be alienated very quickly, okay. And so so in a way, we're also using the original idea, okay, this is from the Silicon Valley, the internet should be decentralized. The internet should be, many small potatoes, okay, rather than just one huge elephant, controlling everything. Okay, that's how the internet economy started to say we should be more decentralized than the old network TV, right? But now it's Uber and Google are more centralized, okay, than automobile, okay, than the TV system. So I think it's also a call to return to the original promise of the digital economy.
And Todd Davies, you want to join the discussion? Todd?
Yeah, Jack, that was a great
Hi, Todd.
presentation. It's
I
really,
think we met before. You look
yeah, we met when you came here, and
all right.
I think I saw you also at an ICA meeting. So I wondered, and since we're both university people, if you could talk about the co-op approach to education, and especially higher education, where the students could really be participants along with the faculty. I mean, the traditional divisions that we see, faculty and staff and students, create a lot of problems in traditional universities. And you mentioned Mondragon University, and so I want to learn more about this approach. And there's a lot of interest in this, as you know, especially in the last month with Black Lives Matter. There's the Free Black University initiative in Britain, and so just whatever you can share from that.
Yes, I'd love to learn more about this topic too, because right before this, I was talking, this meeting, I was talking to a former student who were facing unnecessary pressure from the bureaucratized or neoliberalized university, okay, in the US. But I think it's not a US situation, it's global. Okay?
Yeah,
all the
absolutely.
university, all the provosts are data driven, okay, by the rankings, okay, you know, and those rankings are not from scientists, they are for profit, okay, products. And then that's the one chapter from the book Weapons of Mass Destruction, right? How you know, there's a whole chapter about how this quantified ranking system, okay, are on the one hand pushing up, okay, student debt, and on the other hand disempowering faculty and students vis-a-vis, okay, the private sector, okay, or the bureaucratized elite of the university. One thing, you know, one lesson, okay, I learned from this book, okay, I wrote, this book is actually also my reading note, is that no struggle is completely new. So the conclusion of this book was talking about how today's digital labor struggle should learn from the struggle against slavery in the Atlantic Ocean, you know, on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean from, you know, 200 years ago. And but then the idea for better cooperative university has been around, you know, at least, okay, I think there are concrete examples from the 60s. One of them is in Australia, and it's called Free U. Okay, the free university, free education. Okay, if you check it out, I think Raywin Cornell, okay, the author, okay, the most influential sociologist, also a labor, okay, activist, Raywin Cornell was part of it, and Free U in, I think it was in Sydney or the neighborhood, New South Wales. Okay, I don't know exactly, but then it was a early experiment where they also took indigenous, okay, knowledge seriously, and teach about exploitation. And of course, that was the era of against the Vietnam War and also anti-nuclear, okay, and so about peace studies, and so that's one of the more successful cases. I heard even to this day there are large cooperative university in Kenya. Okay, actually, in one of the platform co-op conferences, you know, in New York City, one professor came from Kenya's National Cooperative University. But I tried to have a discussion with her, but there were too many people, so I still need to learn more, okay, about the Kenyan experiments. And I think one younger member, okay, I think his name is Michael McHugh, and from a new school, he was very serious about pursuing, you know, either transforming, okay, the new school itself or some other university, in New York into a co-op format. And before he, quitted his job in New York to join, he was a full-time campaign for Bernie Sanders. Okay, but now Bernie has suspended. I hope he's returning to that idea. But I think this is not just about university. The university today are now more and more neoliberal corporate entities. One of the several, I think there are at least 9 or 10 trajectories where we can go from a capitalist enterprise to a co-op enterprise. One of them is that when the old structure, so this is like in Argentina, okay, and when the factory boss realizes it's not making money, okay, and then the factory boss is running away sometimes. So if I think this probably will first happen in a private university, okay, in the US, is that if the top management, have already, most of their income are depending on private sector donation or foreign students tuition, okay, from China, okay, or India, all right, and now these students are not coming, and the private sector are not donating. And then the old way of business so what they want to do is just, usually these are middle or even people in their 50s, 60s, okay, very quickly they want to just take their money and leave. And then they will leave in the Argentina case was a factory, and then workers, change the factory, they continue production, and they use co-op format to occupy basically, the factory. Okay? The same thing happened in China, in a steel factory, okay, in Northeast China, about 10 years ago. Okay, so during the financial crisis, okay, a little before the financial crisis, so the factory boss decided it's not profitable anymore. Okay, so he ran away, and then the worker occupied the production line, and then they were making decisions about production and about marketing, and then they turned the factory into profitable. And at that point, the old factory boss came back, want to reoccupy. And then the steel workers, this was maybe 12 years ago, the steel workers had a fight. They actually killed the boss. They beat him to death. Okay, the guy who left the factory, and so the factory were running for itself. So I think a long answer short, Todd, I think there are many ways when the old university model are falling apart, okay, the folly and the greedy, okay, nature, okay, of those management themselves could be creating a window of opportunity for unexpected co-op development within the university sector, just like in the factory.
And I think we're going into a deep depression now in the United States and around the world. When you talk about universities going bankrupt, the private universities are facing bankruptcy in the United States, and public universities are facing bankruptcy. And millions of workers, additional workers, are threatened with being thrown out of work because of the COVID crisis, but also the failure of the system to grapple with this new environment. It's a completely new structure, requires a new structure to how do you deal with 47 million people unemployed? How do you deal with 27 million people without health care? This is a major question of the restructuring of society, which is not going to be done by the capitalists. They don't have a plan, really, how to take care of people. And that's what I think we're facing in the United States, which is not being addressed at all in the capitalist mainstream politics or the media. How they're going to deal with this new crisis caused by COVID, caused by the world depression, and the catastrophic economic conditions in the United States, social conditions, with millions of students can't go back to school and they're fearful they'll get COVID if they go back to school. There's no money to protect them and their teachers. So these are major, major questions facing the entire working class, all the people, which require new plans, new thinking on how to reorganize society. And I think workers taking control of the digital platforms is a part of reorganizing society on a global level, actually, which we have to look at. And Richard Gedney had a question. Richard?
Yes, my name is Richard Gedney. I'm part of the AEW. I work with Mr. Escobar. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. My question was to Jack. Jack, I like the analogy of the snowflakes and the cooperatives. I think that's the way this is going to go, and not having large groups, but having small groups. And it's amazing. I'm so glad to hear Mondragon coming in and helping you with this. Could you tell me have you had any interaction with truckers or any other transportation groups trying to start cooperatives?
Yes, last November, I was in New York for the annual Platform Co-op Global Conference. Every year, usually, we do it in New York. Only 1 year we left, and it was in Hong Kong on this campus, so we hosted. But then last year, I met several. Okay, I think there are different trucker co-ops in Brazil. Okay, they seem to be the most influential and resourceful in Brazil. And I actually accepted one invitation. Okay, in Porto Alegre. If without the COVID, I should be visiting them 3 months from now, but I think they cancel it. Okay, so it's a shame I cannot visit and learn more from them. But somehow, when I think about a year ago, the big truckers co-op, okay, even without platform digital media, they already had co-ops, okay, large co-ops in Brazil for long distance truckers. And when they tried to develop digital media, they actually, I think it was 2 years ago, they actually had a tour in Silicon Valley. I heard about that, but I don't know exactly who. I hope they're not meeting Uber. Okay. They probably should be meeting you or someone else. But the Brazilian seems to have the most organized efforts. So that was 2 years ago. They made a trip to Silicon Valley. I don't know what kind of exactly what they. But then last year I saw at least 3 or 4 prototypes. Okay, when they were working out. Even though it's in in Portuguese, and I was still struggling, to understand. But it looks like they have they are making good progress. Okay, so there are two very basic types. One is you have an existing co-op. Now you are developing digital platform for the co-op, so that people can use a smartphone to order, to purchase, okay, to provide service, okay, as that interface. Or it's the reverse. Okay, we have people from the Silicon Valley who know nothing about co-op. Okay, we just hate the way that Uber operates or Airbnb. So let's start something called Fairbnb. Okay, Fairbnb is actually a real thing now. Okay, and it's a platform co-op, but it's like fair trade. Okay, so there are these 2 basic routes. So the Brazilian co-op is the first, okay, basic development is it has already, I think it has almost 1 million members, if my memory serves me right. I don't know whether that's 1 million vehicles or it's probably 1 million drivers. Okay, some drivers would share their vehicle, right? And so that's one thing. Yes, from Brazil. And in the U.S., the most successful in the transportation sector is Green Taxi, from Denver, Colorado. Okay, so but that's not a trucker. Okay, but historically, of course, truckers, Teamsters, has their own tradition of struggle and collective struggle. Okay, because they are, there are different types of capitalist sectors. Okay, these are in the circulation. These are the blood veins. In China, we had 4 years ago, I would say, yes, 4 to 3 years ago, we had a nationwide. So we had a nationwide equivalent of Uber. Okay, the platform is called Yunmanman. Okay, so it's a Chinese name. Okay, and then you can use your smartphone to order. If like I'm moving my furniture, okay, I can order it, and then it's essentially the same thing like what Uber did with passenger transport, but this is cargo transport. But then the Yunmanman platform was initially it was trying to, it's the same trick. Okay, initially they will give lots of bonuses, kickbacks. Okay, if you use mine, but once they monopolize the national, inter-provincial markets, and it reduce, okay, the payments to workers, okay, and it adds many more algorithms to penalize workers, okay, and force people to work really long hours. So there was a nationwide. So there was, I think, since the time of Chairman Mao, I'm glad people here are still discussing Chairman Mao. Okay, we never had such a nationwide trucker, okay, strike in China, but we had it 3-4 years ago because of the digital platform called Yunmanman, and that actually caused the All China Federation of Trade Unions. This is the official union, okay, controlled by the Communist Party, to alter its bureaucratic structure. It used to be very territorialized within each province, within each city. Okay, the way they organize, okay, they manage or even suppress labor movements. But now, because the trucker, the nature is intercity, interprovincial, so they have to create a new bureaucratic, branch to handle, okay, this kind of platform, transportation and challenges. Okay, so that is a way. The communist China is always a black box, but if you see the bureaucratic structure is changing from the very top of Beijing, the All China Federation of Trade Unions is changing its basic organization structure. That shows, on the other hand, indirectly, it shows the power of the trucker. Okay, but then it's the opposite, not the trucker co-op, but how exploited, okay, platform trucker, okay, economy can be deemed as detrimental to the ruling class, okay, on the other side of the Pacific.
As you're seeing here in the United States, you're seeing Uber Freight coming in, and they're doing the same thing they did with the transportation with just passengers. They're luring people in with higher rates for transferring freight, and then the driver gets less and less as it goes forward. And what you're going to see, a lot of people focus on the self-driving cars, but what you're going to see before that is the self-driving trucks. And that's going to send millions of drivers put drivers out of work. So thank you so much for answering my question. I look forward to reading your book. Thank you so much.
And I think the automation and AI are actually going to, again, marginalize the working class. And capitalism doesn't need the mass of workers that they have under this present organized system for capitalism. There's a SF Cal to everyone: blockchain technology as a means of expanding co-op concept globally yet decentralized. Would you like to comment on that, Jack, or anyone else?
I'm a little suspicious, okay, because I may look young. When I was 30 years old, I was still living in California, and I was out on the beach, in Southern California, and the kid said, "Are you 13?" Or I said, "I'm 30." So I look deceptively young, but I've actually been studying the internet for 25 years now. There are so many, people are saying like www will change the world, make it decentralized. And then, the Communist Party intervened and make it centralized. And then there are people saying P2P, okay, this was in the early 2000s, will change it. But then, it's Silicon Valley, or when Facebook just appeared, okay, nobody could predict, the Facebook can centralize more advertising revenue. So I'm still, I think, like I said, like it's similar. Technology is like the state apparatus. It's a site of struggle. Okay, if we just wait for the so-called natural law for blockchain to take over and defeat capitalism, probably before that happens, okay, Wall Street already figured out a way to use blockchain, for their own benefits. To use blockchain to crack down on Black Lives Matter, activists, to trace them, okay, for example, okay, or other ways to reward the alt-right, okay, the white supremacists can now get, payment, with anonymity. So I think it's still, it's another very important side of struggle. But I don't want to agree with the kind of blind optimism, okay, that it will, because we've been hearing this kind of decentralization, okay, legend for too many times, okay, and speaking from Hong Kong, okay, I might be too cynical, okay, but maybe it's a sign of me getting old, okay. But at the same time, I think I'm calling it another side of struggle, okay, because we want to, for blockchain or for AI and automation, we really need to have a global perspective. So this is, my move. I left California 16 years ago, okay, and came to Hong Kong, okay. The most important thing was to study the global South, okay, in southern China, the factory workers, okay, the minority workers, including people who work under literal slavery conditions, right? And all the AI, if we only look at AI in California or in the global North, okay, we only see the disempowering and how technology, including blockchain, are detached from human labor, okay, as if, okay, the best AI study from a global labor perspective, I think, is by Kate Crawford from NYU. It's called, if you go to, it's called Anatomy of AI. Okay, it's a long article with a huge map, and that is a digital art piece that was just recently acquired by MoMA. Okay, but it tells behind the Amazon Echo, okay, so that we don't need to use our hands, okay, to flip on or flip off the lights. Okay, how wonderful is that? Okay, our hands can all disappear 3 generations from now. All right, but actually behind that, the cloud is not in the sky. Okay, the cloud is actually in Canada. Okay, in the First Nation land. Okay, and then there has to be electricity. The automation, the so-called automation, the so-called effortless, laborless, okay, automation process, okay, including blockchain, actually have to rely on more energy consumption, okay, in the third world, in the Aboriginal land, okay, and so blockchain, for example, there's another art exhibition in Taiwan. I was there. Okay, the world's biggest Bitcoin factories. Bitcoins are also made in factory. They call them farms. Okay, the Bitcoin farms are in southwest China, where there's lots of hydraulic dams, right? And then southwest China, and also the northern part of Southeast Asia, Vietnam, okay, and Thailand, okay, and there are actually a lot of environmental footprints, okay, and then there are massive e-waste sites, and one of them by a postdoc student, and she's Taiwanese, but now based in Sweden. She just gave a webinar to our students last month. One of the big one is actually a labor camp. Okay, today's so this blockchain, okay, or AI algorithms, they are actually based on human labor, but then the human labor are not in California for understandable capitalist reasons. It's the race to the bottom. So there's a bottom to the blockchain economy, to the automation, to the AI, to the cloud, and that bottom is the frontier for global labor struggle, which we should not forget.
Okay, well, I think we've had some very important contributions here, and I want to thank you, Jack, for joining us, and I hope you have a successful move to Singapore, and also we can continue this discussion, particularly in the working class and the trade union movement, because this crisis, this economic, political, social crisis, and the mass movements that are developing right now in the United States of millions are going to be looking for a perspective, a strategy of understanding how to reorganize the world for humanity against the destructive things that we see today with capitalism. So I want to thank you for joining the panel, and thank all the other guests, Edward and Steve Hill, and thank you for joining us at this LaborFest panel. And we've recorded it, so it will be available to others who weren't able to be here in person. So thank you for joining.
I have taken everyone too much time. Can I just make sure I share what I just talked about, the anatomy of AI?
Sure.
The art piece. Okay. So it's here. Yeah. Everyone check it out. It was mind blowing to me. You know.
What's the name of it? What do you share?
I just shared I just shared it in the chat. Anatomy. Yeah, anatomy of AI. .ai.
Okay. Alrighty.
And, I will never buy a Amazon Echo for the rest of my life. But I will try to look for workers, you know, in Southeast Asia who are involved, you know, at the bottom of the AI, you know, industry. Yeah. Okay. And hopefully I can report them to you in future LaborFest.
Very good. Okay, thanks for joining us, Jack. And thank you all for joining us on LaborFest.
Thanks, everybody. It's great.
Bye.
Okay,
Very good. Bye-bye.
Struggle on.
Solidarity.
Bye. Take care.
Yes, solidarity.
Solidarity. Okay.
Be well.
Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.